right, welcome everyone. We'll go ahead and get started here. Before we get going, I think by now most of you are aware how to work this system, but we are recording this webinar. We'll make it available after we wrap up. And if you do have any questions, make sure you drop them in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll do our best to get answers in there. And we'll definitely follow up if there's anything we can't answer right away. I'll get all these slides out to everybody, and again, we'll record this. So there will be a recording available on our website and our YouTube page within a few days of this webinar. So the last thing real quick too is if you are new to the Teams webinar platform, up on the top bar there, you have a more ellipses. If you click on those, sorry, you're able to translate into a handful of different languages. So if you are not a native English speaker, it'll translate the text on the slide for you. So we'll go ahead and dive in here. Today I'll spend a few minutes introducing us to really what electronic aids to daily living are, why they might be important to somebody, and just get us all on a good level playing field there before we really look at connecting to those things. I do want to say that the world of these electronic aids, especially on the consumer end, it moves incredibly fast, and there is quite a bit that I'm just not touching on in this webinar due to the time. So don't go into this thinking this is going to be an all-encompassing thing by any means. I'll do my best to touch on a lot and really focus on mostly on how it might benefit the user of a power chair and methods they have at their disposal to control those electronic aids. And I'll go through obviously some implementation strategies as we go along too. So we'll get started here. Electronic aids to daily living, or EADLs. They provide an individual with some limited physical function means of controlling electronic or physical devices that are maybe essential for their security, their safety, and more importantly, for our context here, control of their environment. So they're intended to provide that independent control of the home environment. This is going to be for clients with very limited physical function. So think high-level tetraplegia, caused by spinal cord injury. This like category of device, it's been called a number of things, right? ECU or something similar, but going back a number of years now, there's been a push to use the term electronic aids to daily living to really help emphasize that what they're doing for a client is a benefit to them, and hopefully make it easier to secure some funding for this stuff. These devices generally are designed to keep a client safe and provide them emergency support, or to give them control over their home environment, or offer virtual access outside of the chair to the outside world. If you go back a few decades, these ECUs, they were big, they were expensive, and they were hardwired to the electronics that they managed. They were built specifically for people with disabilities. If you jump towards and fast forward to today, things have changed quite dramatically. So now we have sleek portable devices that work wirelessly. Most mainstream smart home technologies like tablets, smartphones, Wi-Fi enabled gadgets, they all have started to become the go-to solution for a lot of people with disabilities. So those all-in-one old school units are kind of making their way out the door nowadays, right? And everyday tech like that all of us are using, all of us able-bodied individuals, I should say, they typically are going to win on cost, on ease of use, on reliability, and they're going to do a good job at starting to reduce that stigma that might sometimes come with that more specialized equipment. And now a client who really utilizes these aids effectively, they can start to expect more efficient and independent living within their environment. So these electronic aids can allow a person to make adjustments to that environment, right? That can maintain their health, right? Think adjusting a thermostat so it's a little cooler or warmer, right? They can use reminders and alerts to know that it's time to take some medications. But hopefully, as you're starting to catch on to already here, they just open up a world of control that might not have been possible 5 or 10 years ago. And these electronic aids to daily living, they're not just a benefit to the user either. They are a means of greater independence, but that can translate into less need required by a caregiver, right? Less caregiver hours required for that client. Less strain on the family in a lot of cases when that's the case, right? So people have more of a chance to live their life on their own terms when we start giving them this access. All of that's cool, but let's try to answer this one basic question here, right? Why is this important to our clients? So to start with, um, hopefully it's obvious here. People with disabilities can have a difficult time accessing and controlling things within their environment because of their um, physical, visual, maybe even cognitive limitations. And the client might not have the ability, right? Just thinking of some simple tasks here, a client might not have the ability to reach out and push a button or turn a dial to adjust a thermostat. Right? You saw the guy in the previous slide there. Maybe they have trouble seeing that thermostat and understanding what they're doing to it when they do touch it. So, properly configured electronic aids to daily living can reduce or eliminate that need for other human assistance in operating those things. So when people gain that more independence in their routines, it does make life easier, but it also it's going to boost confidence and sense of control. That feeling of empowerment that you get with it is going to spill into other parts of life, strengthen self worth and overall well being, all that stuff. Physical independence isn't just going to be about movement either. It's really closely tied to mental and emotional health. So when somebody feels in charge of their own actions, their confidence is gonna grow, and they feel more connected to the world around them, right? And just like providing access through means of a wheelchair, these days access to technology is really going to improve the ability for that client to do things like pursue employment or education. It's really going to afford the opportunity and ability to engage in different social settings that they might not have had access to. So now, hopefully, we've got a solid baseline on what EADLs are and maybe why a user of a wheelchair might want them. So let's talk about the wheelchairs a little bit, right? All of the common wheelchair electronic systems out there right now, they all allow for some form of access beyond the wheelchair. And typically this is through Bluetooth communication, but there's still some infrared capability being used out there, a couple other things. And all of this opens a pretty broad range of opportunities to participate in different activities and engage with different devices throughout the day. So we'll talk about it a little bit more, but IR's more or less relegated to like controlling televisions these days, and even though it's an older technology, it is likely still used way more than we think. So the challenge becomes, these days, a lot of televisions use like Wi-Fi based systems or a mix of infrared and radio frequency. So the wheelchair may not be the most successful means of operating that device, but when it is, it does allow for a bit of independence for that client to directly control a device. Bluetooth technology, it's going to be more and more important. It's becoming increasingly important and more commonly utilized, right? As clinicians or technicians, we can see improved efficiencies through like remote programming, remote troubleshooting, things like that. By integrating Bluetooth within the wheelchair and specifically in the drive controls, that client can operate smart devices like phones, tablets, and computers, and enable tasks like communication or home automation and control, and even like education, all that without assistance. So we'll talk more about how that works as we go through here, though. And there are a few primary types of devices that a wheelchair user would benefit from having independent access to. Um, right, physical controls are going to allow a person with a disability that prevents them from physically interacting with their environment to control the device without direct physical access. So the easy example here is smart thermostats, right? That could help somebody manage the ambient temperature for medical purpose, or to let that client do something as simple as like lower the temperature so that it saves some money on heating or cooling. And there are smart adapters or outlets that you can extend some control and connectivity into, say, a non-smart device, right? So you can plug an old lamp in, for example, and use that smart outlet or adapter to then control that lamp remotely. Josh here in this picture, he has limb-girdle MD, and with the progression of his diagnosis, he can no longer really raise his arms more than a couple inches off those armrests. So seat elevation is a great tool for him to raise up, reach forward, and in this case, hit the elevator button to get to his apartment. But he can't really reach high enough to reach the light switches or anything when he is in his apartment. So he's really got three options, right? Sit in the dark until somebody gets there to turn the lights on. Usually his caregiver who's getting him ready for bed. He can call somebody, or with some sort of connectivity, he can turn it on using technology, right? And so smart light bulbs are a pretty inexpensive option that you have the ability to change the brightness or even type of color and light that they emit. So that can make a big difference for some individuals. And then preventative controls are any product that allows a person to live just a safer life while they're in their own home. So even if it only enhances their personal safety while at home, we're talking things like smart locks, right? Those can allow a client to control who is coming into their home or leaving their home. So automatic controls, the last one we'll talk about here, they allow a person to schedule appliances and other devices in their home. So this can be something that helps caregivers and clients feel a little more comfortable and know that vital things like lights or some of those physical controls that we mentioned, they can turn on automatically at a programmed time, and they don't need a person to come do it. Robotic vacuums, those are an easy one, right? That's an easy way for somebody to just have basically clean floors without having a person coming in to vacuum or sweep all the time. So a client in the chair, especially if they have like a service animal in their house, they can just schedule their vacuum to come out every day at a certain time, go run through the house, and they don't need another person to do that. Smart hubs are like a control center for a smart home. They're going to enable different components of a smart home system to communicate and respond to each other through like that one central focal point. There's a few different types. You've got voice assistant hubs, cloud or internet-based hubs. There's some radio hubs for things like Zigbee, Z-Wave, and Bluetooth. So all of that I mentioned to just emphasize that it's pretty important to choose something that's compatible with your devices, right? If you choose a branded smart home ecosystem, you should be pretty comfortable knowing that everything should work together seamlessly. But if you have multiple devices from multiple companies, you might need to find a like central hub or controller that can connect to those different devices, and so it can get complicated, right? And I don't want to pretend it's not. You need to know how each device talks to its controller. You need to know how these different connectivity options might impact like control ranges or response times. And so that can be a lot. And to the point that in like your general consumer electronics world, there are companies whose sole focus is on integrating these things inside of customers' homes. So um, it is a little complicated, but we'll try and come back down a little bit and hopefully simplify things now. So coming back to the wheelchair world again, I'll try it again. The point of this webinar, I'll try and focus on some strategies to control our environment from the chair. So first of all, when should I look at trying to connect to my world through my wheelchair electronics rather than just using the built-in control for that device? The easy answer here, by no means the like end all be all rule, but the easy answer is anytime the client can operate their wheelchair in a safe and timely manner, but they cannot do the same with those external non wheelchair things, that they need to be able to independently operate. That's when we want to control it from the chair. Like I said, of course, there's always big exceptions to those rules, but that two simple questions that gives you a good starting point on whether or not you need to go through the hassle of setting that thing up through the wheelchair. So it's a very basic decision tree here, just a couple of simple questions to ask. And like I said, hopefully might save you some time if you're not sure. I mentioned a little bit of this before a few slides ago, but in general, there's three typical ways a wheelchair electronic system can control a device and operate that device. First up is a classic ECU module. On some electronics, you're talking about an output module, but they basically do the same thing. Using one of these modules, someone can take a DB9 to mono plug adapter like you see in this picture, and you can send, in some cases, up to 8 switch closures out into the world, right? And so depending on the module or the adapter um, that you have, you may not quite get to those 8, but 8 would be typically the max for this type of module. So essentially, they're going to convert directional commands from the drive control, sometimes other buttons like speed up or down or horn or things like that, and they're going to turn those into outputs. So these would plug directly into switch adapted devices, so like an adapted call button or door opener. But it can still be fun stuff too, right? You can find switch adapted camera shutters or switch adapted toys for kids. I've even seen like a switch adapted flour sifter for the kitchen. So you can control a lot of AAC devices with switches as well, using like 1 or 2 switch scanning. So this would let your drive control on your wheelchair control those AAC devices. So the real limitation here in the context of being completely and totally independent is that device would probably need a home on the wheelchair, especially if you want to be able to move around with that device, right? So the benefit though is that whatever that client's drive control is, you ought to be able to control that that ECU module on the chair, that the input or output module on the chair, and thereby the devices that it's plugged into. So infrared allows a client to control a range of appliances that use infrared remote controls. This could be something like changing channels and volume on a television or adjusting some thermostats. Certain lights or lamps, you can turn those on and off with a remote control or adjust brightness, certain fans, things like that. And so the key here is knowing where that transmitter lives on the chair. It's pretty important that you know that. It typically lives on the forward-facing part of most displays and sometimes hand control joysticks. IR, though, it has to do with line of sight. So the transmitter needs a clear line of sight to that device, which might be difficult if that display or joystick or whatever is mounted at an angle, for example, so that it's visually accessible to the client. Sometimes, depending on the lighting, that signal could deteriorate faster, which would really cut into your effective range for IR. And I kind of touched on this earlier. For the last like 20 years or so, remote controls are increasingly using a mix of IR, radio frequency, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, things like that. And so, um, a quick tip to figure out though if you have infrared on your remote control is, number one, it'll probably have a little LED looking thing on the end of it. And if you use your smartphone camera, you just point your camera at it, open the camera on your phone, point that little LED at your camera and hit some buttons, you ought to see a faint light. That's your actual infrared light. And that'll be a pretty solid indicator if there's some sort of infrared. It'll at least tell you there is some infrared happening there. So teaching the code from there is usually pretty simple. It requires putting the chair into like a learning mode and pointing that remote at the chair and just hitting a few bursts. But there are code libraries that you can import into the chair and make that setup much, much more painless. And so if you're having trouble getting a device programmed or taught to the chair, you can import that code library and there, job done, right? So it's a lot easier that way too. Now, back in the day, Bluetooth used to require a dedicated module, but nowadays it comes built into pretty much all the wheelchair electronics. So Bluetooth is going to be the thing that enables wireless access to external technology. Again, we as clinicians or technicians and providers, we can program the chair remotely or be there with the chair and program. It can function as a mouse on Android and Windows. On iOS, we've got switch control and assistive touch for similar functionality, and we're going to dive into that stuff a little bit more here in a minute. But this kind of connectivity it's really going to boost independence because it is wireless and it isn't quite so dependent on line of sight or proximity to a device. You do still need to be in range, but it lets you use your phone, your tablet, your computer, things like that, right? And you can participate in school or in work or even like we're talking about here, control smart devices within or around the home. So the possibilities here with Bluetooth are just increasing by the day because of that consumer electronics world. Now, not every wheelchair will have these controls integrated or even the ability to integrate them. The chair does typically need expandable electronics, and with those expandable electronics, you'll usually get your Bluetooth and infrared already integrated these days. So expandable electronics also allow you to add on different modules, so you could add an independent output module or dedicated Bluetooth module if you need to. Considering that we're discussing these EADLs that are intended to provide some independent control of the home environment for people with limited physical function, the important thing here is that the method of controlling them, it needs to be reliable and effective. Typically, controls or those controls for these electronics are activated by physical functions that are going to be available to that user. So those two rules there, right? Activating by the physical function available to the user and being reliable and effective sounds a lot like an alternative drive control, right? So if you have a chair with expandable electronics, that does typically mean that its ability to operate Bluetooth and infrared is extended into that drive control. That includes your alternative drive controls like an iDrive head array. So just touching on that a little bit right now, iDrive itself, our head array drive control that we did talk about a month or two ago in this webinar series, it does have Bluetooth in it within it, but right now all we allow with that Bluetooth feature is wireless programming and some driver training. And like I said, we covered that. I believe it was in last month's webinar. do have some fun plans for some really cool things here, so keep an eye out in the near future. But circling back, we don't need a second set of controls so long as we're able to pair with that device over Bluetooth or an IR. So we're really giving that client a more seamless experience with technology outside of the wheelchair if we can pull this off. So I do want to touch on a couple of things that we have here at Stealth to kind of go along with all of this. So from the user's perspective, um, we have a couple of devices that they can interact with that can then reach out into these other electronics. So iConnect here is a family of powered switches that are or sensors that are designed to work in all kinds of situations. So each version that we have ends in a simple mono plug. So to the device that you plug it into, it just looks like you plugged in a mechanical switch. So the nice thing is that iConnect can it really shines when it's paired with EADL devices like an OGCOM system or environmental controls that operate with basic mechanical switches. So for somebody who can't use those basic mechanical switches, iConnect is going to open some of those doors, pun intended here, to alternative controls like a fiber optic sensor or a sip and puff system. And so now imagine here you're able to control your bed with just a gentle sip or a puff. And so that's the kind of thing we're talking about with iConnect here. You have some options with iConnect. We have options in a 12 or 24 volt version, and the 12 volt version is perfect for your like manual chairs, for desks or beds. It's going to draw power from a battery pack or a wall outlet. And for the power chair side, we have our 24 volt version, which taps right into the batteries on the chair. So iConnect does require that there's a cable connected to the device you're controlling. So iConnect needs you to be pretty close to that device, or at least the iConnect control part of it needs to be close to that device. Just to quickly touch on each of these styles here, we have fiber optics. These sense light reflected off of an object, like a finger. It doesn't need physical contact, so it's great for users with very little movement, which prevents them from using that traditional switch. You can set the sensing distance and have it activate when the client covers that light or uncovers it. Here we have a client who is using a fiber optic for driving his chair. But I wanted to show how precise you can be with fiber optics. It requires very, very little movement. You have about a 3-inch or a little over 7.5 centimeter sensing distance. And inside of that 3 inches, you have 9,999 points of adjustment. So you can see here how small the system is and how little movement he's giving to operate it. So it can be placed just about anywhere you need as well. A capacitive proximity sensor can sense something that's nearby without touching it. The short version is it does this by creating an electrostatic field and detecting when that field changes as something gets close. So this goes for almost anything. It can sense metals, plastics, liquids, powders. In our case, like a finger or head, body part. So they can sense within about a 1 centimeter range, or about 3/8 of an inch. But your actual reliability is within about 7.5 millimeters, so like 9/16 of an inch. And there's a small dial on the side which allows you to adjust that sensing distance within that range. But we have options here that include a single or 2 sensors. The dual sensor gives you 2 mono plugs. So just like with the fiber optics here, you need to be wired directly to the device you want to operate. And then the last iConnect one real quick is the sip and puff. So this is a pneumatic switch that uses intraoral pressure to create a switch closure. So just like the rest of iConnect, the device you plug into sees it the same as it would if you're plugging in a mechanical switch. There's two mono plugs on the end here. One's for anything that's positive pressure and the other for anything negative. So no calibration needed or anything like that. And we have a couple of different straw systems to choose from that you can mount all over the place. So this sip and puff control would also need direct connection to the device that you're controlling. Now, the other real quick product that I'm going to talk about is the Mo-vis multi-switch. This is an interesting device that lets somebody control up to 4 different things using just one switch or sensor. So this can be a sensor or a proximity sensor or any mechanical switch. So instead of juggling multiple switches and things like that, the user can do it all with one. So this is really designed for like auxiliary wheelchair functions and what we're talking about today in like environmental pieces. So think of things like turning the chair on and off, changing mode, tilting the seat, but then controlling accessories like a hand warmer or it works great for communication devices. Basically, if you can plug a mono switch into it, this can handle that, right? So just like the iConnect items, it's very, very helpful for somebody with limited movement. Think those with muscular dystrophy or dystonia, things like that, who might have a hard time operating multiple switches at one time. So there's a single jack on the opposite side from that you can't see in this picture here. That's where you would plug it in, and you can use 2 splitters to output up to the 4. So we have sensors that come in a 12 millimeter or 24 millimeter. So basically half an inch or 1 inch in size, and you can adjust sensitivity and they calibrate automatically as well. So you can choose how you go through those 4 different outputs and how they output the command, right? You can do a momentary command, a timed command, or locked, things like that. So you get to choose what works best. And like I said, activation is pretty flexible too. You can do clicks and hold, scanning, all of that to move between the different outputs and then actually activate the thing. So it runs on USB power. So long as you have like a USB charger, power bank, laptop, some open USB port, it'll be able to charge it. So we even have a battery pack that has a USB on it you can use here. So once again, though, we are tethered to the connection, to the device with cables physically connected to it, right? And so it does need to be close to that device. But moving on into implementing a little bit more wireless options here. Some of these things I do want to touch on. The fact right now that there's no standard of care when we get into this like electronic aids to daily living branch of assistive technology. There's no standardized methodology for going about the assessment and the identification of devices which that client may need. And maybe even less for the setup of those devices and the training to use and maintain them. So a few key things here is to be effective, we have to make sure that the client is ready for these things and then they're provided proper training. So a little bit more on those things is we've established that like tailored smart home solutions are pretty essential to meeting unique needs and preferences for our clientele, but there's no one size fits all approach here. All right, we've got to strive for finding technologies that the user has the ability to control, but also a willingness to work with. If I'm given something to somebody who they find it very, very complicated, it's never going to get used, right? An interesting finding here of this particular study was the preference for control interfaces. It varied pretty significantly based on disability type, right? Our spinal cord patients really favored smart speakers. So they're able to talk to that speaker pretty effectively. CVA patients preferred remote controls. CP participants really opted for smartphones and tablets. So um, even though a lot of these participants had fairly low overall awareness of smart home technologies in general, there was a pretty high preference for smart speakers, TVs, and air conditioning systems. So just normal everyday things, right? To be effective, again, I mentioned these things require appropriate user training and readiness, right? The training should be personalized and it should be a continuous effort. So when that happens, we're able to address a pretty broad range of technology literacies and hopefully overcome a lot of different obstacles to adopting and continuing to use these things. I like to think of this idea here as if I'm trying to teach my parents how to use a particular technology versus teaching my kids how to use that same thing. There's a pretty rock solid chance that I will not have the same approach to that. So the same idea applies here, where our approach to that individual should be pretty unique to them. The last quick thing I want to touch on is that while these devices can provide a lot of opportunities, they do come with some costs to the users. Obviously, there's a monetary cost of getting a hold of the device in a lot of cases, but also there's one of time. And so when we're dealing with technical limitations, improper education, we're just going to end up in a world where we're very frustrated, and it becomes very clear how important that personalized training is. So we've got to have a user who is willing and ready to use these devices, but then help them with good training. Now, while we're setting up smart devices, it's getting easier than ever. Choosing that unified ecosystem, which allows all of the different items to talk together, can really simplify things for the setup process, but then streamline it all for the user. So a little bit of planning and preparation can go a long way here. But if we already have a system, it's okay, right? We don't need to panic, even if they're not the preferred like digital assistant for that person. Things like that. This isn't like an iOS versus Android or PC versus Mac situation. A lot of smart home devices play nicely with multiple systems, so you don't necessarily need to have one system and just stick with it until the end of time. On top of that, the like prevalence of these electronic aids to daily living, moving more and more towards app-based control, it's becoming very significant, right? Especially as individuals who've grown up with technology are becoming candidates for this type of assistance, and they're more accepting of it. So a lot of this is being mostly driven by the rise of smart home technology that is very largely controlled by apps and voice commands. The Internet of Things (IoT) and the widespread use of smartphones, and so that shift really allows for more accessibility and remote management. Thinking especially for like older adults and individuals with disabilities. But fair warning though, especially in the older adult populations, despite high internet accessibility for most older adults, some users still do have trouble navigating or learning new digital platforms. So again, really highlighting that need for a user-friendly setup, maybe all under the same ecosystem and proper training for that kind of population. And we all have preferences in which type of cell phone platform we use. Right, this is a pretty personal preference, and Apple and Android are both capable of controlling the environment with apps and hardware added into that environment. They both have a version of Bluetooth mouse control that allows the client to use inputs from their wheelchair drive control to move the mouse around on a screen and then virtually touch apps and control the device. Unfortunately, right now, most apps for environmental control don't really function on like computer-based systems that are running Windows. But take a quick look at basic setups on these things. Hopefully, you'll see it's pretty simple here. And again, apps update daily. Software on these phones and mobile devices update all the time. So I didn't dive incredibly deep here, just because it's a pretty broad overview, and these things will be changing as every app update comes out and as every like iOS update and things like that. So when we use a power chair with an Android device, the system just uses a mouse function for access. So just like a cursor on your computer. As you move your wheelchair's drive control, the cursor moves on the screen in that same direction. Right, the chair needs to pair with that Android device over Bluetooth. That's usually going to happen automatically once that wheelchair has been connected to the phone or the tablet before. But when that cursor appears, you're ready to go. You can move it around the screen just like a regular mouse. You do need a way to perform like left and right clicks. A left click opens your apps or activities buttons and things like that. And the right click is what takes you back a screen or exits the apps, things like that. So there are other apps like Android apps that you can add extra features like advanced click options. And since most wheelchair electronics have built-in mouse, they come with some click options that can be programmed as well. So even some of them even let you adjust like cursor speed for better accuracy when you're trying to select a particular target. On iOS, switch control is a feature that lets the wheelchair user navigate their device using pretty much a big red box that highlights items on the screen. You can use your drive control to move that box and select apps or groups of apps. The setup's pretty simple. In your Apple like accessibility menu, you would just want to enable switch control and then start assigning commands, right? You can assign the right command, for example, to the next item, left to previous, and then you can use each command to move that box up and down, for example. And then when the client reaches the row with the app that they want, they just could use a, say, forward command for a tap to select it, and that would be just like us tapping the screen. There's an auto scan feature that when that's turned on, that red box moves automatically, and you just have to air quote tap when that row that you want is highlighted. So it takes a few steps. It is a little cumbersome to use switch control, but most wheelchair users who can drive can figure this out pretty well. The nice thing though is the accuracy isn't very critical here. So other mouse controls, you do have to be somewhat accurate. So this can be a great option for those who struggle with like touch accuracy or accuracy with their mouse control. Here we have just a real quick short video showing how this works. To start with, you do have to connect your chair to the phone. When all of that's good, you'll get a little red box on the phone. See if we can skip us to that side. Sorry guys, there we go. So you can see here he's using, once that red box starts showing up, he's using a series of commands on the joystick to select what he wants. Right, he's going to turn on a fan and a lamp on and off and unlock and lock a door, all using this switch control feature on his chair, or sorry, on his phone. So assisted touch is another accessibility feature built into the newer iPhones and iPads. Think of this as like a mouse on your screen. It's very similar in the way that like the Android mouse is. When you pair it to the wheelchair, you get a circular cursor that appears, and you only have to get it partially over the app to activate it. So it's a little more forgiving than that Android mouse is. So the best part here is it only needs a single left click. That's a big advantage because it might simplify setup. You just have one access point for that click. And there's also a menu button that you can click, which opens this little feature set thing. Right, you can open like a home or Siri, things like that, and you can customize what these options are here within iOS. Once you're all paired and connected, though, in the settings, there's a pointer control feature that also lets you change the contrast color or the size of that pointer and its scrolling speed. So it's very, very customizable as well. So to set up Assistive Touch, you're going to start by opening the settings menu. You're going to pair it to that device. You're going to pair that device to the wheelchair, through Bluetooth. And in this case, it was Mouse 1209. But after you pair, you'll go back into the settings menu. You'll get into accessibility, and there's an option called Touch, and you'll turn on Assistive Touch. And once you do that, you get that cursor and gray menu button that'll appear on the screen. So navigation works just like a mouse cursor. You move the cursor over an app button. You perform whatever you have as a left click command from the wheelchair, and that's what's going to open it. You could also set it to where if you hover over, it can do like a timed thing. So to exit an app, we can click on that little gray menu button, and that will give us an option to select a home and get us out. So again, you can change the options within that little gray menu thing. So this is really going to provide full access to the device, and when we combined that with different apps and environmental control hardware, we really significantly increase the independence for users who are a little bit more technically savvy here. Now, the mouse control on the wheelchair does allow for controlling a PC using the wheelchair drive control. You can set mouse clicks on the wheelchair. It is best to have 2 clicks here available, like on the hand control from Quantum, like having that 1 and 2 button on that QLogic joystick. Those will let you do like your double click, your right and left clicks, and those things are pretty important on a PC. You can find some apps or softwares that allow for you to click without actual buttons in the devices. Accessibility menu, you can also set it up to use keyboard keys to perform those mouse clicks and drags. And then there's virtual keyboards you can set up. So there's ways around not having those physical controls. But the short story here is don't forget about all of the accessibility features built into the computer itself. Windows has a lot of stuff going on that really helps make the mouse more functional for individuals with disabilities. They're just as important as like these features that we have on all the phones and tablets. They'll make a major difference in that ease of use. Right, and how easy it might be to complete some homework, for example. And since we're on the topic of connecting to your world, I don't want to forget about gaming. The thing with gaming is it's not just about fun. It can actually change how your brain works, right? And so we're just looking at 3 quick studies here on this slide. They show some very interesting things, right? Gamers often react faster and handle tasks requiring that quicker thinking and memory control much better. With fMRI bold imaging, that has shown differences in the structure of the brain in areas linked to vision and attention and memory. So that's suggesting that gaming can shape how our brains work, right? Different kinds of games are also going to give us different unique benefits. So action and puzzle games, for example, can help improve visual attention and problem-solving skills. Beyond that, gaming can enhance working memory and reaction time. might even increase gray matter in regions tied to memory and spatial navigation. But it's also, it's not just cognitive gains. Gaming can improve quality of life. In the last study here, nearly 91% of people said that adaptive gaming made their life better. A big majority of them felt more satisfied overall with their life, and still most of them reported stronger social connection. So gaming can have big impacts mentally and socially. So using Bluetooth, we have a few different ways that we can connect and play games. Here we've already paired with a few devices, but once you do that, your chair can remember those devices moving forward. So selecting which way you're doing that particular game is just done by navigating through your mode functions, and then going through like switch access or mapped input output, things like that. And that can open up access to a lot of games on a variety of platforms. So real quick, I'm going to actually play just a couple of short videos from one of our quantum reps that were made to show some possibilities. So I'm going to let him do a lot of the talking in this video. But this first video, we'll just look at a simple mouse game as a quick example here.
You really want to tune up those mouse skills? Pair your QLogic controller to your computer with Bluetooth as a mouse, and no keys 1 and 2 needed, just moving. This game from Steam called Super Orb Collector is by far one of the funnest games I've ever played. I believe it was like 99 cents when I got it. So let's get started here. So you want to mouse over this orb, and you want to drag it up and collect all the other orbs, and it gets quite hard to do, but it'll teach you fine motor movements. Alright, here we go. Whoa.
Okay, so what I wanted to point out with this one is everything is going through the joystick. So we were able to play, again, just a simple mouse game. I say simple, I can't play that game, it's too hard for me. But we're able to play a mouse game through your joystick.
Well, you get the point.
Relatively.
It's a really fun game.
Right? Not much going on. So now the second one here, he's using the chair electronics in combination with an Xbox adaptive gaming controller. So we're getting a little more complicated here. You can start doing some more interesting things here, but we can again still kind of in a couple of different ways use our electronics on the wheelchair through some of these adaptive gaming controllers that are out there on the market nowadays, and open up more possibilities. So we'll play this other quick video here.
Let's level up again. Quantum sip and puff module, a straw, and a few switches mounted to the Xbox controller. We're going to drive the car with this straw. I'm going to use the soft puffs and soft sips for the left and the right, and we're going to use this switch for the gas pedal. Let's pretend this is mounted to my chair, or maybe on a headrest, or on a tray somewhere in front of me. But for right now, for demonstration, we're going to use, I'm going to pretend it's mounted to my headrest. So let's get started. Now this is not easy to do. Practice makes perfect though. So excuse whatever happens on the screen here, but we're going to get started now. Can be done. So if you want to practice, then practice makes perfect.
So to wrap it all up here, um, electronic aids to daily living are really pretty big game changers for people with limited function. To today, they've really evolved into pretty sleek wireless systems that use everyday technology like smartphones and tablets. And the goal is simple here, right? We want to give people independence by letting them control things that they want to control, like lights and thermostats and locks, all without relying on a caregiver. And since most of this is working through Bluetooth and infrared connections that might already be built into the wheelchair electronics, uh, there are those options now for people with severe mobility challenges. But the big takeaway is that these tools don't just make their life easier. They're going to boost confidence and mental health and open doors to education and entertainment and social engagement and stuff like that. Hopefully, I don't know if I've done a good enough job in it or not, but hopefully you can see by going through this that if you guys can set up stuff on your own smartphone, you use your own smart speakers and other devices at home, you're already pretty adept at getting this stuff connected for your clients. It's really not that crazy difficult. So, um, with that, I do appreciate everybody's time. Before I open up the floor to questions, I do want to remind everybody that we'll get a PDF copy of this presentation out to everybody who's joined us today. We'll send it out to that email that we used to register. We'll also have a link for a quiz for anybody that wants some CECs and anybody that is willing to take a general survey about the experience today. We want to make sure that these are worth your time. We'll make a recording available on our YouTube page and website as soon as we can. But from there, if anybody has any questions, let me know. Type them in the chat, in the Q&A, and we'll get you some answers. While we wait on those to come in, I do want to just say thanks for everybody who has joined us throughout this year. We are putting the polishing touches on next year's webinar series, so look for some information on those coming very, very soon. But I appreciate it, everybody, and we'll hang out here for a couple of minutes for questions if you have any. Okay, so I'm going to take it as a no that there's no questions, so I'm going to go ahead and close this out, guys. I appreciate everybody being here. And like I said, keep an eye out. We'll have more info coming out soon on our webinars for next year. So appreciate it, and we'll see you guys soon.